Well, are we friends or what? Anyway, they both like this shelf, so just how it is, right? Gotta make them a double-decker shelf for this window because they don't fit on here too good, but they seem to be getting along pretty good. Well, I'm getting ready to check all the fluids in this Jeep, and since it has not just a transmission and a rear end, it's got front differential, rear differential, transfer case, and a transmission, and a couple other things you got to do. You know, when you check the lubricants on this, the best thing to do is, you see I got it jacked up with ramps, 2 pairs of ramps, so the whole vehicle is jacked up. Now, if this thing was like had a suspension lift and a body lift, that's about how high it would be, but it's not going to have that. It's going to be pretty low to the ground. Actually, that's pretty much all you need for most times. But there's a few other things I'm going to do besides check the fluids, and it does have red line fluids in it already. And before I start taking this on longer trips, I want to make sure it's all filled up. It does have red line, actually, good stuff in it. Now, the way I like, now I got some Pennzoil synthetic, which is some pretty good stuff. 75/90. I don't like using 140 in this thing because sometimes if it's cold, not that I got to worry about it down south, but if it's cold and you got 140 in it, you'll get the transfer case stuck in low and stuff pretty easy sometimes. And what I like using, I had to pick this up because now you can get ones that are bigger than this. This is a 1/4 of a liter, and you can get 1/2 liter, full liter. 1/4 liter gets in tight places, but usually for topping it up, that's all you need. What I do is I take the end off this, and I screwed on a 1/4 inch fuel line, so that can get up in where the hole is to the filler hole. And you could use the bottles with just squeeze the bottle with the hose on it, but it's actually easier to use this damn thing. So got some open end wrenches. I'll just go underneath there and we'll open up the stuff, and I'm going to show you a couple other things I do besides just filling up the front and rear differential, transfer case, and transmission. There's a couple other things to look for on this vehicle too. Well, these are very easy to get to. This is the rear differential, so I got the little squirt can. I put the other nozzle on it, and just to top it off, the transfer case and the transmission. Whoa. I don't know how am I going to get those bolts off. They are on there like rock solid, like I can't believe. But I'll get them off. And same deal with the front differential. You used a little can on it, and it was pretty full, so it wouldn't have been, there would have been no damage at all. So I'm just going to make sure it's filled up. Actually, it doesn't really have to be full right to the very top, but you know, could be a hair below the top level, but it's good enough. So problem is going to be getting off those 2 bolts, and there's something I got to do with the clutch cable. I'm going to show you what that is, because there's a pivot point you got to watch with grease, where if it isn't greased, what'll happen is it'll break the cable after a while. I got the original clutch cable on this thing, and it's absolutely perfect. Also, while you're under here, it's a good idea, if you can see this brake line, you know, it's a nice silver color because I put chassis saver on there, which locks out all the moisture and stuff. It goes right over rust. A little bit of surface rust on the brake line, and you know, it was just that one section, but you want to go over that stuff like that if you're underneath the vehicle. You see that type of stuff. I use a Q-tip and a glass jar, small glass jar with the chassis saver in it. And, you know, in other words, you can just throw away the Q-tip for going over little stuff like this, because, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth like a ton of cure. So just point that out. Yeah, this is okay. So this is the front differential, and you can see here's the oil pan. That's the oil plug. Right there is the where the clutch cable goes on there, and there's a lot of grease on there already. I'm going to put some more, and what happens is this here, right here, this pivots basically as you're pushing the clutch in and out. So you want to actually have a lot of grease on that. That's your clutch adjustment too. You want to have a lot of grease on there, because what will happen is it'll cause the cable will flex back and forth, and it's the end of the cable that can break. You got to watch for that thing, so keep a lot of grease on that area. Yeah, something else I'm doing. This is the little marker light I installed. I made use this strip caulk, and it's old stuff. I had it around for a million years. It's still good though because it was in a container. It's not out in the weather. So I put it around the edge of the plastic marker light, and you know, I made this. And I used to have a rubber piece in there, but I made a nice metal one with chassis saver, glued it in there with panel adhesive, so it's got the little 94 bulb in there. So all you have to do is put this over it, and this will be all weather sealed now. It should be good. Okay, so you know, like I said, I made that, and to make that waterproof, you use that caulk stripping, and you can see it probably in there a little bit. But that's it, it's solid. Now I'm not even going to take that off to paint. I'm going to paint what do you call it, truck bed lining up the whole hood up to about here around the fender. And actually what I'm going to do is, when I go over this whole thing with acrylic enamel, I'm not going to use anything fancy. I'm going to use acrylic enamel with a catalyst. I'm going to scuff down the truck bed lining and get all the hide spots. So it's going to kind of look like a rough finish with the, I'm going to do the whole thing with the acrylic enamel over the truck bed lining. But it'll be smooth enough that if you wanted to wax it, you can wax it and stuff, but it won't be necessary. It'll be just kind of like a textured finish, that's all. In other words, 50% of it's going to be a textured finish. It's going to be, the hood will have the truck bed lining with the sand it down somewhat. This, the windshield, where it gets a lot of debris, up around this, up to this molding body line here. This will just be smooth black. And I'll go over everything with the acrylic enamel, and it'll be shiny black, but it'll be look the same color, but it'll be texturized in some of the spots where it can get slammed with a lot of dirt and stuff, because it'll have. So if the acrylic enamel chips around the bottom, it'll have truck bed lining underneath it. It'll be pretty damn solid. Well, this turned out to be a real bitch. Take this fill plug out of here, because what happened was, well, I think the size is actually a 24 millimeter, and you can see this is kind of chewed up. And you can use a 15/16, but don't use a 12-point socket. Well, you know what the deal was? This damn thing, I'd even checked this. Well, it turned out it was full of oil because it's a rebuilt transfer case and a rebuilt transmission. But I wanted to check it before I wanted to use it on distances. I figured it was had oil, and I just couldn't get this damn thing off. You want to use a 6-point socket. So what I wound up doing was going around with this thing with a Dremel tool, and I shaved it down a millimeter, and I used a 23 millimeter impact socket on it. If that didn't work, I was getting ready to put a weld a nut on it, and I didn't want to do that though, because if I weld a nut, then I gotta, and I throw this away. But actually this thing fits on here, even though it's a little chewed up. It fits on a 23 exactly perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some what do you call it on there, anti-seize. I always thought it was unnecessary to put it on this stuff because of all the oil, but it's going on there this time because of you know, if it sits there a long time, I don't think it was over tightened. It probably hasn't been, I bet you this was not loosened up in 7 years or more. So that's the deal. That was the deal. You want to use a 6-point socket. It's a 24 millimeter, but actually a 15/16 6-point socket fits on there a little tighter. But don't use a 12-point socket because and I wound up having to use an impact with this damn thing. So the transmissions was full, the transfer case was full, and these things can be a real bitch, believe me. I couldn't get this off with the vice grips. Even when I made this flatter on this side, I used a big pipe, it would not come off. And I used full tank pressure on a strong impact gun, pressed this up here really hard. It was in here all the way, and it was on full, so it was probably in there about 250 foot-pounds or some crap, and it did not strip the threads at all, so on a bolt or in the case. So they can go in there pretty tight with something this thick, you know, that big of a nut. Yeah, this is something else I'm doing. You're probably looking at the side of the door and saying, what the hell is this wire going to here? Actually, this is the speedometer cable, and it attaches to the transfer case. So what I did was, if you notice right here, there's a clamp with a hose, and it's around the casing where the speedometer cable is. And actually, you could stick a screwdriver down here and turn it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it up with some lubricant and Marble Mystery Oil and let it soak down in there and turn the cable by hand, and this way to lubricate the cable probably all the way up to the speedometer, because the oil should creep all the way down, you know. And this, you know, I could fill up this whole hose here with oil by because there's a clamp, and that's, in other words, that's sealed. In other words, the hose is clamped around the casing where the speedometer cable goes into the transfer case. And actually, the end of it, I'm not showing it on here, but the speedometer cable, on the end of the speedometer cable, which will be down that hole there, you know, down through the hose, it just looks like a slotted screwdriver. It's real simple. It's real simple. So you know, I just want to, you know, that's one way to oil up the cable, because if the cable, because I noticed the speedometer was doing some erratic stuff at low speed, so that means the cable needs oiling, and you know, the cable will break after a while if it keeps doing that. So you want to have it. I'm going to use Marble Mystery Oil, but I'm going to actually initially start with some lubricant, just like WD-40, lightweight stuff, just to break it up, and I'll turn the cable by hand with a screwdriver so the lubricant gets all the way through, and it should go all the way through down there, and you know, work its way back up through the top right where the speedometer is itself, so it should get fully lubricated that way pretty good. And you can see what I was doing. After that, I put some Marble Mystery Oil down there. This stuff, it's pretty good junk, and you know, filled up the hose. It's on there with a clamp, right, so there's no oil dripping past it. It's just going in the casing where the speedometer cable is. And I take the screwdriver and I'm just turning it like this till it gets down in there, and let it soak for a while, and then I'll hook it up to the transfer case again, and I should have a nice smooth speedometer cable that's not going to break. That's another stupid maintenance thing, just want to point that out. So, you know, if you're wondering how to do that. And just to show you where the speedometer cable goes, right in here, there's one, you don't have to take the bolt all the way out, it's one 10mm bolt. Like, well, on mine there's a brake drum here, because this is a Jimny 1300. This, the brake drum is actually on the back of the transfer case versus on the rear wheels. So I can lock all four wheels as long as the transfer case isn't in neutral. But, you know, there's the transfer case, that's where it is. And I'm going to probably get another fill plug for this damn thing. It's in there. It'll come out with a 23mm. It's got a whole bunch of, what do you call it, anti-seize on it, so it shouldn't have a problem. But I noticed this thing should run nice and smooth now, this speedometer cable, because I noticed when I was turning it by hand with the screwdriver, it was working a lot smoother. And you know, I started out with like WD-40, and then I put Marble Mystery Oil in the cable. Marble Mystery Oil should be pretty good stuff. You know, it's used for air tools. It's great. It's a real lightweight oil, and it's not too light, but it's light enough for a cable. It should work pretty good.